everyone, welcome back to Yulan's channel. Today we'll be continuing our AP Psychology journey, and today we'll be focusing on Unit 3.4, Visual Perception. And even though some of the content were overlapping with the previous videos we talked about, a lot of new things were mentioned and new perspectives are introduced. So please keep watching this video if you have watched my previous videos, and if you haven't watched my previous videos, please do watch those videos because having some background knowledge before we start the video is really useful. So yeah, let's begin. In earlier videos, we learned how we are able to convert what we see, which is light waves, into neural impulses, and how we detect color and shapes. In other words, how we can sense visual stimuli, which is also called bottom-up processing. In this video, we'll learn how we perceive that visual stimuli or make sense of it and interpret the images we see, which is top-down processing. More specifically, we'll learn how we perceive form, depth, and motion. Okay, in the 20th century, a group of German psychologists discovered that we have a natural tendency to organize our sensations into wholes and what they called gestalts. This means that our brain don't just take information in, but we interpret and actually construct our perceptions. The following are some examples of how we do this when perceiving form. So the first one is figure ground. This idea is that we naturally organize what we see into objects that stand out from the backgrounds. For example, in the image here, if you consider the black in the image to be the background, then you will see a white face as a figure, a woman's face. If you consider the white as the background, you will see a saxophone player as a figure. In addition to organizing objects in our visual field into figure and ground, we also naturally organize objects into groups. Some of the common examples of these principles are similarity. We group similar figures together. For example, we perceive a group of baseball players wearing the same color jersey as one team. Second is proximity. We group nearby figures together. For example, we perceive players sitting together on a bench as one team. And then we have continuity. We perceive smooth, continuous patterns rather than discontinuous ones. And second last one is closure. We fill in gaps to create a complete whole objects. And finally, we have connectedness. We perceive items that are uniform and linked as a single unit. Now we have depth perception, which is our ability to perceive objects in three dimensions and to judge distance. So basically, you can divide this into monocular and binocular. As the name suggests, monocular is only one eye. And also, for the importance of depth perception, I forgot to mention, it avoids us to fall downstairs and off cliffs, such as Gibson and Walk demonstrated in their famous study with infants and make-believe visual cliff. All species, by the time they're mobile, have this ability as it is essential for our survival. So monocular cues are available to either eye alone and include relative height, which is that we perceive objects that are higher to be farther away from us. So in this image at the bottom right corner, it looks like the house is farther away because of this monocular. By the way, this image courtesy is from Mickey and Marisa. And now we have relative size. If two images are the same size, we will perceive the one closest to us to be larger. For example, if you place a water bottle in front of your computer, then the one that's closer, which is your water bottle, looks bigger. This happens even though the computer and water bottles are like probably similar height. And now we have interposition. If one image covers the other, it looks closer and larger. And then we have relative motion and motion parallax. When we are in motion, the objects we are looking at look like they're moving as well. You would see this happening when you're in a car looking out of the window. And finally, we have linear perspective. Parallel lines, no, never mind, not this one. Parallel lines, oh yeah, it's this one. Parallel lines look like they come together in the distance, so as this image shows. And finally, we have light and shadow. When there are shadows involved, there is a perception of depth. And our second type is binocular cues. In contrast to the monocular cues, binocular cues is the use of both eyes. The main binocular cue is retinal disparity, the difference between the two retinal images that result due to your eyes being about 2.5 inches apart. Your brain judges distance by comparing these images. The greater the disparity, the difference, the closer the image is. Now we have motion perception. Our ability to perceive motion is important because it allows us to do things like drive, walk, and ride a bicycle. Generally, our brains perceive motion by assuming that shrinking objects are moving away and objects that are getting bigger are moving closer. Sometimes, however, we perceive motion when there really isn't any. The phenomenon called stroboscopic movement creates this illusion where we perceive movement in slightly varying images shown in rapid succession. Did you ever create a flip book when you were in childhood? This is an example of stroboscopic movement. The same concept applies to film animation. A super fast presentation of Mickey Mouse in slightly different positions will create an illusion of movement. Another illusion is called the phi phenomenon. This is created when adjacent lights blink on and off in quick succession, like you might see on Christmas lights along the edge of a roof or highway arrows telling us to keep to one side or the other. Okay, now we have perceptual constancy. Perceptual constancy is another example of how our brains play tricks on us as we interpret the objects in our visual field. They also call objects constancy or constancy phenomenon. It refers to our tendency to see familiar objects as having consistent color, size, and shape, regardless of the changing that we're seeing. In short, our brains interpret stimuli as they are assumed to be, rather than as they actually are. So we have color constancy. So even though some colors may appear different in different environments, but like their color is the same throughout all the situations. So we perceive objects as a consistent color. It doesn't change in our mind. And then brightness, similar to color, shape is also the same way working, and also size. So like basically it's just like different ways to I guess categorize things. So yeah, it's just the same concept. So perceptual adaptation, this refers to our remarkable ability to adjust to changing sensory input. If you wear glasses, you can probably relate to this example. You get a new prescription. Initially, you may feel a little dizzy or out of sorts, but after a day or so, everything seems back to normal. A more extreme case of this phenomenon can be experienced when wearing visual distortion goggles that can actually turn your world upside down. But even in this extreme case, people will adjust to this inverted world and even be able to throw a football with some precision. Now let's do some practice AP question. So the first one is, what is the function of rods in human visual perception? This, by the way, this is from our last videos on visual anatomy. So if you haven't, please watch that video because this is just a quick recap. So the options are A, they're responsible for color vision. B, they transmit auditory signal to the brain. C, they're responsible for vision at low light levels. And D, they help in focusing images on the retina. Pause the video and think about this. The answer is C. The rods are responsible for vision at low light levels. Rods are photoreceptor cells in the retina that detect the light levels and provide peripheral vision, but they don't perceive colors or sharp details as cones do. So cones is another type of rods, and the ratio of rods to cones is roughly 20:1, which is super interesting. We have our second question. What is a potential limitation regarding Hermann von Helmholtz's play theory in describing pitch perception? A, it doesn't account for individual differences in hearing ability. B, it struggles to explain low-frequency sounds accurately. C, its principles are outdated and compared to modern theories. D, play theory isn't capable of explaining stereo sound perception. Pause the video again. So the answer is B. It struggles to explain low frequency accurately. The place theory posits that our perception of pitch is determined by the location of stimulation on the organ of corti. However, it isn't as effective in explaining how we perceive low-frequency sounds, which is a potential limitation for Hermann's theory. So yeah, here comes the end of our lecture or video today. So if you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe and possibly comment on it and give some feedback, I would say. And thank you for listening.